All right. Hello, gamers, adventurers, and everybody in between. Welcome to the first video of my discussion series DnDnD. Dungeons and Dragons and Discussions. Yeah, it's too many D's. I was gonna mess it up sooner or later. Today we are discussing about the game's namesake, specifically dragons. And to help me with a very specific question that we have about dragons, I've invited two brainy gentlemen who will be helping me figure out this question. Up off to my wait a minute. Over to the left is Josh, a Dungeons and Dragons DM who has been how many years have you been doing being a dungeon master for Dungeons and Dragon?
Probably since my later years in high school. So I'd say 8, 9 coming up on here.
Okay. So, longtime Dungeon Master, Josh. And over on my right here is Jeff, who has been a little bit longer. Just a
But
just a tiny bit. How many years you have on your belt?
41 years.
41 years.
Yes.
And to my knowledge, you have asserted a lot of, skill to the fact that you created your own little thing here or there.
I did. I
Yes.
did. I played
Excellent.
pretty much just about any TSR game that came out between 1979 and 88. And then back in 1980, I started creating my own game.
Excellent. I love it. So, gentlemen, today we are talking about dragons, but a very specific question. Um, Critical Role, if you do not know, is a very popular podcast. They have a lot of adventures. Their second campaign just ended recently. They just started their own thing. But in one of the first campaign of Vox Machina, one of the characters managed to teleport himself inside a dragon to try and yeah, I know it was a nice play. I have to give him credit. I believe this was if they're out there, Scalen and Vex, who teleported themselves inside a dragon using Dimension Door, which I brought. It kind of worked what they were trying to pull off, but brought a question to my attention. Are dragons fireproof on the inside? So I know
Interesting.
that
Okay.
in Dungeons and Dragons, it's a very specific set of dragons. So the first thing is to where do the first question to answer basically is where do dragons get their like natural fire resistance?
Interesting. All right. Uh, I guess it'd have to be specifically if we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. We're talking, I would say, more specifically about like a red dragon or a gold dragon, then, or if we're narrowing it down to the actual resistances within those kind of creatures. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say yes. I know that there is like multiple specific dragons that actually breathe fire, as well as like chromatic dragons, with frost, acid, whatever other little goodies that they have. It's different. So like it could be a red dragon who specifically breathe fire, or if correct me if I'm wrong, metallic dragons. They do some of them breathe fire.
Yes. Yes. So that'd be the gold dragons.
Oh,
There's
God.
Okay.
that. I believe brass. I believe as well.
So where do they get that natural resistance to fire? Is it magic based or is it something a little bit more like natural based?
Based off of whatever rules you're going off of. You're talking specifically Dungeons and Dragons. If I remember correctly, to TSR when they first created it, it's based off of the thickness of their scales. They are immune to their own breath weapons.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah, I
interesting.
would. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that as well. I think it's at least within the universe of Dungeons and Dragons, as much as magic kind of takes a hold with those kind of things. I would have to agree that I would believe it's more of a biological resistance, as this is something that they are biologically capable of doing. I'm part of the kind of I think group that would believe that dragons can expel whatever breath they use from some kind of biological mechanism, whether that's stored up bile for acid or so on. And I think that it would be just like the same way a snake would be resistant to its own poison. To your original question, with would they be fire resistant from the inside, I would actually have to probably say no. I don't know about you, Jeff, but I think
I'd agree. I'd agree. They would
yeah.
not be immune inside.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's the resistance from the outside, and at least in the maybe the airway or the tract would be there because of its biological impulse to be able to spew fire. But I believe that like if you're talking about like being like within a dragon, specifically say like a stomach, I would have to think no. I would think that there would be no reason for them to be biologically resistant to fire from that vantage point.
Okay.
And actually, I think Josh has nailed it as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. So let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. Oh my goodness, I only briefly glanced at it. There was like a dragonology book, right? And the way that they have the anatomy of the dragon is that they have two separate chambers, right? So somewhere in their throat, I got to stretch over my microphone here so the camera can see where I'm pointing. Somewhere in their throat is like the chamber of where they would have that specifically, like a type of pockets where they would have like fire or acid or gas or whatever. And I know Matt Mercer, when they were talking about this daring plan of teleporting themselves inside a dragon, he actually brought that up because one of them was a ranger whose favorite dragon, whose favorite animal was dragons. So she researched it a little bit and saw that they had two separate pockets, one being the stomach, the other being the actual container of whatever their breath weapon is. So that being said, I want you to think of like an appendix, basically, right? So if an appendix bursts inside of us, it's kind of bad news for us, right? So what if that throat weapon, or I'm no doctor. What if that throat weapon was kind of the same deal, right? Why would they have a separate chamber and but still be resistant? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking of the biology, the anatomy of a dragon. Again, I'd have to study more on Dungeons and Dragons and what they do now with that. But I would make the claim that if they have, like Josh said, a bile duct, which is a flame duct, or where the lightning comes from, whatever it is, that if that is ruptured, that it would harm the dragon. I would say. I liked how I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about things that that are not Dungeons and Dragons, but in the that Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey movie with the dragons, Reign of Fire, I liked how they described it. It is an actual gland, and that it didn't actually turn into fire until it was a liquid that once it was exposed to air, ignited.
So
But
it's
you could very well cause it to. It could be a toxin inside the body, much like you said with an appendix
mhm.
rupturing and seeping out.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that it would be an internal organ of sorts, especially like a containing, I think that pointing out the fact that it is like an appendix or maybe like some other kind of biological thing, like we aren't immune to our stomach acid. We aren't immune to all that bile that's within us. There's very specific tracks within our body that our entire lives, our bodies are fighting to keep contained from the rest of us. If we say had a ruptured stomach, that's a very bad thing because of the fact that acid is spilling into us. I would have to say we're immune, if not at least a little bit. Unfortunately disgusted by the fact that we would throw up, right? We have this acid that we could technically spit if we shoved a finger far enough down our throats. But if it was within ourselves, I think that's a much bigger issue.
Yeah, agreed.
Mhm. Okay. So going to that, does that mean that they're fireproof or just weak to whatever that is in their throat? If it's a already prepared fire based excuse me, if it's already prepared like fire, or if it's just some type of chemical compound that would react into a fiery outburst.
Either way, I think, like Josh said earlier, that in their esophagus or wherever that is, it's tougher than, say, their intestines or around the stomach or around wherever this organ could be. So, like Josh said, we can throw up many times and we do throw up bile and a bit of stomach acid. Our throats might get sore and scratchy feeling, but it doesn't destroy our throats. However, if you were to poke me in my stomach and it seeps into my body cavity, that's going to start eating away at my organs.
Yeah, it's yeah. Well, to go even further into like the medical aspect of things, are like say our digestive tracts in that way. They are like designed for that specific thing. We have mucus that protects the outside that is actually resistant to a certain level of pH balance within ourselves. In fact, just going along, and we've gotten into kind of a weird side tangent there, but whenever you do actually throw up, your body actually does produce excess saliva and mucus in order to actually protect the tracts and the esophagus while it is ejecting that material. I would think that, like, if we're talking externally, I think that dragons, again, if we're going more specifically with fire as opposed to any other ones, but it would follow through. I would think that it's kind of more of an idea that they exist in these areas. When I think of a red dragon, they exist around, and they don't have to, but they exist around volcanoes or furnaces, these places that are naturally hot anyway, so they need those or are drawn to those areas because of their external resistance. Their scales are there. But say a black dragon who would have the acid breath were to be in a similar situation, I think that the black dragons are resistant to acid. They might live in swamps in different areas where maybe the pH balance is in such a way where the acid is being almost like, yeah, like a biological and evolved resistance.
Agreed.
Okay, all right. So one other thing I'm going to add is that if that's all said, well and done, what if it's something a little more magic based? I know that magic is the undiscovered science and of like whatever, but in when they actually killed the dragon, it was a black dragon, so he had acid. Um, they were trying to carve whatever X, Y, and Z off of him, but because the dragon died, whatever reason, the magic of it of the protection started to fade, so the acid that he had left in his little pouch or whatever started to dissolve the body around it. So could there be a more magical protection around it as well?
See, I think that's actually, again, more in line with the idea of it being a biological thing. If the way that the body decomposes upon death is because a bunch of your functions begin to degrade. You're not producing that mucus anymore. The cells that are like producing a biological way to preserve that area are no longer being produced. They're no longer there to actually protect it. I would think that very similarly, as like we say, quote unquote, like the little bits of this dragon were becoming less and less potent or less and less valuable the longer it stayed and integrate, even if it was within a matter of minutes, I would believe is very similar to the idea that I mean, anyone can receive a blood transfusion or can give a blood transfusion, but as soon as that heart stops beating, a lot of that product expires, right? So I think that it's very much so, I think, leaning even more towards that, the fact that that was, in fact, what they saw upon that dragon's death.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I know there are some authors, there are some writers that lean towards the magic holds everything together, and once the magic's gone. But in Dungeons and Dragons, that'd be like, okay, Tensor, the wizard who created Tensor's floating he died thousands of years ago. So does that mean nobody can use that disc anymore? Does the magic die? I'm not sure I agree with it being all magically being held together in Dungeons and Dragons. It's more biological.
For sure. I think that as far as like the ability to exhale whatever X breath or to resist it is more biological. Now, again, personally, a bit of an off tangent, but I do think that dragons, at least within my world, the way that I see them in D&D, dragons themselves are inherently magical beings, but no more so than a human who can harness that energy. No more than like a wizard. They are beings capable of harnessing that kind of power, but it doesn't necessarily fuel them. So it's the same way that a human in that world can bleed and exist with its own kind of stuff there, but still harness that magic. I believe that magic is an external force more than an internal force when talking about the organic beings of D&D. Of course, when you talk about like Warforged constructs, those are of course held together by magic, but as far as like biological beings go, I believe it's more of an ability to harness magic than innately their being of magic.
And just like Josh is saying, with harnessing the magic, being around the magic, there are some creatures that I believe that probably can absorb. Thus, a dragon being around so much magic, being a creature probably originally formed through some sort of magic. Yes, their organs, their cells, their skin, scales, teeth, blood, whatever, is probably more valuable than a human's who's been using magic for a while. Although the human's been using magic for a long time and they're also imbued with it, they die and become a lich, right? So
Yeah.
We're not going there. That's a different question. All right. So we are running out of time here. So bottom line, are dragons fireproof? Yes or on the inside? Yes or no?
no,
No.
not inside.
No,
No.
On
not
the
on the
inside.
inside.
All
No.
right. So unfortunately, DreamWorks How to Train Your Dragon, despite of how much we love your movies, it seems you got one fact wrong. Thank you, Josh and Jeff, for coming out to or being here virtually to help discuss this. And to all the viewers watching, please, if you liked this video, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next Dungeons and Dragons and discussions. Thank you for coming out here, and have a good night.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.